This is the Modern Craftsman Podcast with
Tyler Grace from TRG Home Concepts.
Nick Schiffer with NS Builders.
Johnny Horahan with Vintage Builders.
And Shawn Van Dyke with Shawn Van Dyke.
Perfect. We are broadcasting live at the Tapco booth, 202 with Boral at JLC 2018. We were just chatting about at lunch how yesterday they had to rope off the escalator because attendance was too high.
They had max
Really?
capacity.
Max capacity.
Really?
Yeah. They couldn't let anyone else in the exhibit hall.
That's crazy.
So
I didn't
wonder-
even get a badge yesterday.
No, we got badges this morning.
We did.
So I wonder if next year, if they'll do it here or if they'll have to look for another venue.
Not to ask.
We will.
Should
You
go
got-
south.
You got room in
Yeah.
your backyard?
Shop.
You got the farm?
If you build it.
So, Sean, you've been here all week?
Yeah, I got in Wednesday afternoon, which everyone was telling me you're not going to get in because of nor'easter. So,
Yeah, that 1 inch we got.
2 inches.
well, yeah, but I was here a couple
Yeah.
weeks ago in Long Island when they did get like
Oh,
10 inches
hammered.
overnight. You guys would just be I don't know how you guys do it up here, but
Hasn't
anyway,
been fun.
I got in Wednesday and it started snowing a little bit. I was like, oh, here it comes, and I was like, nothing.
Yeah, it
What am I
snowed
worried
heavy,
about?
but it was just like an inch and all right, done.
We
Yeah.
got slammed down home.
You did?
Yeah, we got like over a foot. It was heavy.
Yeah. So in Wednesday, because I had a course taught on Thursday. You know, for some people, this is day 3 of
True.
JLC on the business conference side of it. So I did that.
So what class was it?
That one was slow growth strategy. So kind of stuff that no one likes to hear about, like data. How you got to get the data and crunch the numbers.
I love that.
So did that, and then
Who put the entry box in between the podcast
know.
microphones?
Fine. Come on up. Give him a microphone.
there we go.
He's got the road mic.
We talked about that. So you're talking about collecting data and watching your history and
Tracking it.
Tracking.
Yeah, it's just, you got to growth, undisciplined growth will put you out of business faster than running out of cash. Because, we get too busy, go for the, too big of a project, scale up, meaning we bring a bunch of guys in, but we haven't tracked anything or we don't know how to grow. And one of the quotes that I used in that is like the growth for growth's sake is the ideology of the cancer cell. Some guy said that somewhere, but that's kind of what happens is if you're just growing to grow, you'll scale up your problems as well. And
So true.
Yeah, and it really hurts. So knowing how to grow slowly, meaning these things take time, but once you figure out these systems and some of the data, then you can actually grow pretty fast. One example that I use is like Chick-fil-A. That used to be just a Southern company, but now they're everywhere, right? 25 years for them to get to $5 billion company, another 5 years to get to 10.
Wow.
Right? So they, can scale up once you get to that point. So,
I mean, that's a common thread that we talk to a lot of guys about. But I mean, a lot of the guys we're talking to are comfortable with it. Like they've already failed or had flaws where they've now, when they're talking to us, they're like, no, I don't want to scale up like crazy. Like Jeremy the other day was just like, I did it.
Yeah.
From like 0 to 70. Then he throttled down to 4 guys. Right?
Yep.
And then that's just a roller coaster.
Yeah, that's what we talk about in there. So it's growth, good growth could be growing smaller, growing more efficient, growing
Methodical.
more specific. Yeah. And there's a lot of different ways, but that's what I'm saying. Just grow to grow. Okay, how? Big? Nothing wrong with that. Wide, small, whatever. Just use some data and do some things to help control that, and then you can do whatever you want to with your business.
I feel like when you say something like that, especially, amongst a crowd, I'm sure there's got to be a giant percentage of guys that have fear in their face. When it's like when you talk about the cancer cell thing, everyone's like, crap, am I growing to grow? Is that what I'm doing? I mean, I know personally, like,
Are you scared right now?
I'm scared.
A little.
Let's do therapy.
I'm
Yeah, I
actually
feel like picking up on
shaking.
that.
I am. Like, wait, do I have too many guys?
What am I growing for?
I think it's hard to gauge your growth until you reach like a checkpoint where for most guys it's like year end, let's get our taxes done, let's actually sit down and crunch numbers. And it's like, yeah, I had a lot in sales and it cost me a lot to be in business as well, because most guys aren't staying on top of that end of things and the accounting end of things. So those checkpoints come few and far between, and they're so immersed in it before they can like pull their head out and be like, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah. Or it's the other way. You're not making any money. You can't pay the bills.
And you don't know why.
You don't make it to tax season.
Yeah, it's just about, and it's even for the small companies that, or the one-man shops. Like, what do you want to grow in specifically, skill-wise, or you're ultimately going to sell some service. Figure out what it is that drives that, and how you can scale that up or grow that or grow small. Just it's about efficiency. That's why I say at the end of the session, I say that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I learned that from one of our lead carpenters years ago. He said that to me. I'm like, oh, yeah, I think that's true. I had another guy, one of our other carpenters, he's like, no, fast is fast, you idiot. And I was like, yeah, but man, it sounds really good. So
we get a ton of questions, but what do you get, through social media, through the website, through Fine Home Building, what are you seeing the most of for questions out of the carpenters businesses that contact you?
Well, first of all, it's like, what kind of, are you selling snake oil here? Yeah, that's kind of like, what is it that you exactly do? But a lot of it is just kind of like what Tyler was saying. When you get the numbers at the end of the year, sometimes that surprise is like, I think that just being aware now, the questions are like, okay, I don't know what's controlling this. Sometimes it's good, but sometimes it's bad too, saying, I don't know how to make sense of these numbers. Can you help? And that's where we start off with a lot of people I work with. Is like, yeah, let's just break the math down, and you only have to learn it once because the math won't change. If you can know how to apply that, you just keep reapplying it, and you can focus on other areas of your business, right? And so it's really about, and especially this time of year, people are going to start getting their tax bills or whatever, and they're going to go, I don't know why this number is like this. And so a lot of the initial questions are just about, I don't think that I'm doing the right thing, and there's some fear in it. And I just tell them, hey, the things that you're fearful of, you're not the only one. Everybody, I don't even want to make a mistake. It's just that's the path. Sometimes you got to learn through that. So I think it's very comforting for people that reach out to me or talk to or spend some time with, that you can just say, hey, you're not doing anything wrong. It's the same path a lot of other guys are. Now let's focus on what do you want to do? What's your goals? And then we just break it down and start working on that.
It's a common theme with everyone that we're in touch with, that everyone's getting into the industry for the hands-on part. It's probably much like the restaurant industry, where like, you're a good chef, let's open a business, but you know nothing about business. So everyone's working backwards. We're not businessmen learning the carpentry aspect. For me, that feels like it would be a much easier transition, because carpentry for myself seems very black and white, and to teach that. But like, we aren't of the business mindset. So to jump in with the hands-on approach and then work backwards and try and make money at that point, you could be a very good carpenter, a terrible businessman.
Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to help out those guys too, that don't want to run a big business, that want to be a solo guy or whatever. I still say, hey, you sell your value and set some of that money aside. Like, here's a plan taxes are coming at the end of the year. You don't have to have 4, 10, 15 guys. You individually want to work by yourself and bring in some help whenever you need. That's great. That's awesome. Taxes are still due, right? You got to pay yourself something, right? Eventually your body's going to break down, right? You got to retire, but
have a plan. Have a
plan.
Yeah.
Retirement. We talked about this early on in the podcast. Is that everyone's in the business and trying to get they're in their business, and they're trying to make the money and make sure they hold on to employees, make sure they do their updates on their cars, tools, whatever it is. But then at the end of the day, end of a decade, what are you putting away? That, like, there's that commercial where everyone guesses how much they need for retirement, and the lights only light up so far. It's like, is anyone really going that far? And I've had that conversation. I'm only 38, but a number of times where there's no 401k for me. There will be with Benny, but it's like, how do you? That's got to be part of the plan too.
Yeah.
Not just about day to day, week to week, month to month, chasing the jobs. It's got to be your body is going to take a hit.
Yeah, we did talk about that early on, and we really we talked about asking our guests and seeing what our plan was, and it hasn't been something that we've dug totally into it. But I think
that's what happens to retirement.
Right.
I think it kind of
sneaks up.
It becomes a topic, and then it fades away, and then either a new employee comes on board and it gets asked, and then it fades away.
Yeah.
Or
do you have benefits? Do you have 401k? It's like, yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah.
We're gonna put it into place eventually.
It's in the first year plan.
It's in my head.
Well, and so that leads to the other question. So it's really, one's about the numbers and dealing with the fear. I don't understand the math, and that's kind of a easier problem to solve because you just got to, learn that and then apply it. But then there's other clients or contacts. They have a bigger company, and it's people. It's questions about, like, I got 10 guys now, and they're asking benefits questions, and like, what do we do? I'm like, yep. You gotta put it. You
Shawn,
need an employee manual.
Are
and
guys
you gotta,
asking you that beforehand? Like, I've asked Nick this, and it's in my head. Before you hire that bookkeeper or that new PM, like, how much that salary is going to cost. Like, to me, with Ben, like, we're not going to make that decision. I know I want to get that person at some point. I want to make sure that my numbers do work that I have written down. That then I feel comfortable bringing someone else on, because I don't want it to be a part-time thing. Once a month or the first 6 months, and then I wean them off. I want it to be a career with us. Are people asking you how to do those calcs ahead of time? Like, I know I need a bookkeeper, or you dive in with them and then you realize that they're not good at the numbers and you need to sub this out. How do you pay for that person?
Yeah, if they're doing the books themselves, they're spending time on it, and there's a certain value associated, because if they can put work in place and there's a value with that, or they can sell work, there's a value to that. So the highest use or value of their time, they're spending it inefficiently on the books.
But guys will say, hey, from whatever to 7 to 7 that they're really on the clock at work, and then it's kind of the duty of the owner to do that work, whether it's 7 to 10.
Right.
So they're not really it's not billable time. I know it's opportunity cost that they could be doing something else, but I'm just trying to talk to that kid that's listening to this, that's like, all right, I know that makes sense, but I'm doing it later in the day, and that's not the case. Like,
you asked me the other day, you said, how I hired a bookkeeper, and you said, well, what was the math behind it? I said, I just couldn't do it anymore.
That's right. Sometimes it's just that, and then you realize, oh my gosh, it took me 20 hours to do this probably incorrectly. It took them 2. Yeah. And they found problems and they fixed it in that same amount of time.
Right.
And it's, you're like, oh, and then, I don't know, $50 an hour, whatever it is.
You could track more too.
But it's, what you can do selling jobs. Technically, if you spent a couple hours with a client, sold and closed a job, if you looked at the math, it's probably thousands of dollars an hour that you can make. You need to focus on that and not do something that you're not very good at, the books. And the thing is, now with technology and internet, and I have clients that I've set them up with virtual bookkeepers, and they're in different time zones, and it's just that's their bookkeeper. They just do that. They don't have to be in your office. They don't have to come and pick up that shoebox full of receipts.
I'm with you.
And it's cheap.
The first thing I did was I didn't do virtual.
I should say cheap, inexpensive.
Yeah.
We basically hired somebody that was a bookkeeper that was doing my taxes before, and then they have access to QuickBooks, my credit card statements, and so they're basically sitting at the office. They do payroll. I mean, I punch the payroll, but they do all the other part of it, the fees that come along with that, and I just had to basically sit back. But that was, like, if you asked me, people had asked me what I would do if I started my own company, that was one of the first steps I put in place. For me, I think it's $400 for the month. That includes paychecks and includes QuickBooks, because I get a discount through them.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys will struggle too to say, okay, well, I need all those systems in place, and then I go, no, that's what you're hiring that person for.
Yeah.
That's what I struggled with.
Right?
I mean,
they'll dictate that.
Yeah, and I've talked to these guys. I talked to you about it. It was just I was trying to understand the system entirely before I hired someone, because personally, I know what it takes to be a decent carpenter, so I can hire that. I don't know what it takes to be a decent
master. Wasn't it master?
I got rid of that.
Yeah.
On a card.
Ken,
We said
Ken
glasses.
Alger really called me out on that, so I got rid of it. But you're right. It's like you're hiring them to develop with. I'd spend a year trying to put those systems in place, then hire someone, and then they would be like, all right, we're going to change it. Rather than doing it together.
You're saying you don't know what basically dictates a good bookkeeper either. Like for
Right.
you to go and hire somebody, it's like we were joking around, but she's got glasses or he has glasses. They're going to be a good book. Like you have to. That's not your field. You
Right.
don't know anything about that.
Right.
But there are things that you can say, like, when you're interviewing a lead carpenter or an apprentice or whatever, there's questions like when some guy comes to your shop and wants a job, right? You see the type of truck that he drives. You ask him something about the tools. You haven't even gotten into his really experience, but you got a good feeling he's doing got the right look and got the right tools or whatever, right? Same thing with the bookkeeper. They should be telling the right bookkeeper is going to tell you, if you're honest with them, hey, we're kind of a mess. I don't have really any organization. Here's our system. What would you recommend? And the right bookkeeper is going to believe there, and you're going to feel very confident, like, oh, I don't have to know the whole system. Because they're going to say, yeah, we've done this a lot for other builders or here's the system that works. Dropbox to this, to QuickBooks. Here's a reporting structure. And you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that does make sense. It would totally solve our problem. They're going to say, yep, and it's X amount of dollars per hour. And you're going to be like, yeah, it's fine. Because you just hired the same equivalent of a lead carpenter or a project manager. It's just, it's just in a different
part of the business.
trade. Yeah.
Right.
Just interview them and ask them every question that you don't have answers to about the bookkeeping. And if it
Yeah,
sounds
people-
right,
yeah.
it's like, all right, no, that makes perfect sense.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you like spreadsheets? 10.
Yeah.
You're hired.
You're hired.
I think
Favorite part of
I
Excel.
think a lot of it is people not knowing and their insecurities to go ahead and ask those questions. We had a conversation with somebody last night where they're trying to find a new kitchen designer, and like they've always just laid out their own kitchen cabinets, and people aren't getting back to him, this and that, and they don't know their process. And it's like, if you don't put your foot forward and schedule the interview or schedule to meet with these people and ask them questions, even when you first start in business to go to vendors, we had joked about like waiting until all the older guys kind of dissipated to go up and ask your questions, because like I don't want to go up here and look like I have no idea what I'm talking about. But it's the same thing with the bookkeeper. You don't know that end, and that's okay to admit, hey, I'm ignorant to everything that goes into this. What's a proper sequence? What's your process? Explain it to me. But so many guys don't want to admit, like, I don't know anything about this.
Right.
They feel like that's a flaw or an insecurity, or they're going to be judged for it. And I think that knowledge that can be basically put across the entire spectrum of our business. Like, if you don't know, ask somebody.
Yeah, the sooner you get over that fear, the better. We're going to pause real quick. Tapco is giving away one of their breaks. So they're going to take the mic and interject.
Yeah, we're back.
Congratulations to the guy 2.5 hours away.
Yeah.
That may or may not pick it up.
Whoever eventually wins
He's
that.
in New York. Just trying to think what I could charge to bring it to him. What's it worth?
So you
have Shawn break it down for you.
Yeah.
That's what he does.
55 cents a mile.
Nah, it's got to be more than that.
Tyler, you were talking about getting over the fear of hiring someone not so much hiring someone, but understanding that you aren't going to understand the whole system with bookkeeping, and hiring someone to do it, and being fearful of putting something in someone else's hands, without totally understanding it.
I think that people in general are afraid of what they don't know. And a lot of people have an insecurity as to admitting that they don't know. And I think that they just try, hey, I can figure this out, or, I don't have money to pay for somebody. Or like I said,
Can't
even
be that hard.
with vendors and everything else, it's like to extend your network, you don't know anything about it. You're afraid to ask questions. And this is no different than you not being able to know how to execute something on the job.
Right.
You'd go to somebody who knows and ask them, and it's the same exact thing. You're putting your faith and your trust in somebody else, and it's the same thing. It's just a different industry.
Shawn, you probably know the book. I remember reading it early on, is that they talked about how when they were trying to hire someone for the office, that they were fearful that they were going to find out all their dark secrets of they weren't as successful as they appeared, and they weren't tracking their numbers, and they weren't doing everything that he thought that everyone else was. And then they hired someone and said, okay, now I give him all my secrets, and he's actually making it better. And now I'm not as fearful because I thought I was going to be judged on it. Where that's their job.
It's like going to the dentist. Like, you don't floss all the time. You
Yeah,
go.
when was the
you
last
go-
time you flossed? I just have
Last
weak
night.
gums.
But then you go there and they find a cavity, then they fix the cavity, and you're fine.
right. That's
Yeah.
actually a really good analogy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
When
air pound.
Yeah, that's
Air
good.
pound.
Yeah, when I talk to guys, I mean, I can hear it on the other end of the phone or see it, do video conference. Like, there's fear with it, and when I say, yeah, that's just like every other person I've talked to this week. This is not, and there's a solution, and you just can tell them, paint them a picture of this is where we're going to do. There's always ripping off the Band-Aid. All right, let's rip it off and get from here to here. We can't do that overnight. We're going to do it incrementally, but what you're suffering from or suffering with, there's a solution. We just got it. But you're on your path to success because I was always saying, you raised your hand and you asked for help. It's the people that don't ask for help. They don't want exposed. They think that that's going to expose something.
But you're running in this crazy, you're being chased. Like, I worked for a company that they were $300,000 in debt from some crazy advertisement that they put in. Didn't read the fine print, and they thought they were doing it bi-monthly, and it was bi-weekly. And they got hammered. Then he bought sprinters and all this other stuff. So there's a huge amount of debt there. And then we basically went at it where, all right, what would be the goal at that company? I wanted to then be partner in that company. I'm not going to do that until we have all this stuff set away and solved. So the goal was, how do you then sell the jobs, get the profit margin where you need it, so then you can start paying that off. And then what is the time frame of paying that off where then people could be comfortable enough to be partners in that business again. So my point with that story is that company was $300,000 in debt. That's not crazy. It happens, but you can correct it. Doesn't mean that you're over the top and it's all right, I'm screwed. Don't live in that fear, and you can enjoy your business by talking to the right people, talking to Shawn, getting the bookkeeper, and solving those fears that you have. You wouldn't design a house if you didn't know what you were doing. So you'd go right to an architect. It's the same as Shawn, an accountant, anyone else.
It's true. It's no different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you solve the book problem, you're going to have people problems. And I'm not saying that to create fear. Just that's the next thing that's coming. You're going to grow, and you're going to grow well, and you're going to be able to hire guys, right? Nick and I had talked about that as you hire guys. Employees need information, and you have gotten your company to this point by just doing things that you knew, right? And the guys that are there around in the early years, they learn by osmosis. But as you bring on more guys or gals, whatever, then they're not around you as much. You're not breathing the same air because you're growing now. You need to put some policies in place and say, we never had to define how we did work here before because everybody just watched me and we did it and we figured it out. And now you're 3, 4, 5, 6 guys. It's you need to tell the new guy, this is how we do it.
My wife is reading a book about child psychology, and it talks about how kids without rules, they end up growing up fearful because they don't know there's no boundaries. So it ends up not being helpful where you set rules in place, and I think it's similar in the work industry. When you set things in place, it's easy to stay focused and it's easy to stay on track, where if there's no boundaries, and I've run into it before, and John and I have talked about it, it's the guys don't know, here, this is the job. All right, what's the expectation? What's the expectation? Yeah. Is it a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? And I don't set that in place.
You were saying it to me you're this staircase came out awesome. And you're but I never told them how long I bid the stair for.
Right. And then you said why, and I said I don't know.
You're to me it was just why did you not finish the conversation?
Right.
Did you just not get to it?
And the guys are asking. It
blows my mind that you would give them a job, plan for it on X amount of hours, days, manpower,
right.
And then what your profit was, then just let them run.
Right.
It just
and
blew my mind.
And it wasn't that they didn't want the information or they didn't believe that they could do it in the time I was allotting. It was a bad move, and we talked about it in length. And now it's I sit down with the guys and I explain what I'm thinking, or prior to pricing it, hey, what do you think it's going to take?
That's when you do that and you realize, wait a minute, the solution to this problem is not me estimating. I'm not I could do this at a certain rate, but I can't grow the company. I have to estimate it. My guys aren't. It's not that they're not good. It's just a different system when you got.
Right. For me to work an extra 2 hours a day, it's okay. Maybe I make a little less per hour. But now if I have my two guys working 2 extra hours a day, that's time and a half times 2 guys for 2. times 2 hours. Now that's actually money out of the margin,
Yeah.
and that's, I mean, that was the hardest learning curve. As easy as that is to implement, that was the hardest learning curve from going in the field to hiring guys that are in the field and being transparent from pre-construction all the way through construction and giving them the expectations, because now they look at it and they're saying, hey, maybe I talked to them in pre-construction, or maybe we're in construction. They're looking at it saying, hey, I don't know if we can do this in 2 weeks. And then I sit down, I'm like, this is my process. This is what I'm thinking. And,
Yeah.
oh, okay, that's not what I was expecting. We could do that in 2 weeks. We could probably do it in a week and a half.
But I also think tracking it's huge, because like you said to me early on was like, I bid stuff based on how you would do it. Meaning
Right.
you'd work.
When I started, yeah.
Yeah, you would work crazy amount of hours to get it done. Then you would basically bidding jobs going forward on your timeline,
Yeah.
Right.
and not theirs. So then you had to track and learn their learning curve on how quick they can produce.
Right.
But a lot of guys don't do that. They just kind of roll with it, and then they're like, that, and guys never look back at the numbers.
Right.
So they never really know. They just got the job done, and they don't know if they actually made money.
But
Right.
again, that's a very common problem. I work with my clients to say, okay, how did you estimate this thing? Let's break it down. That equals so many hours. Now, did you tell the guys?
Yeah.
We got 472 man hours. Divide that by 8 hours a day by 3 guys, whatever. That means this is what you have bid. Hey, if we go over that, at least we know we've identified. But you say, how do you forget to do that? That's just one of those things you forget,
But
because
here's-
you've got so many other things.
Here's the other thing is that what's the matrix to say that your guys are successful? Getting the job done isn't what's going to check off the box if they're performing. Like
Right.
at 6 months, a year, how do you understand that they are actually growing? That they're
Right.
actually producing more for you, and they're a good part of this team if you don't lay out those ground rules.
And especially if every job I'm saying, how long does it take?
Yeah.
You know, they could pad a time every time.
Yeah.
Maybe they give me double the amount of time it should take. I sell it for 4 weeks instead of 2 weeks, and then they hit the 4-week mark. They look successful.
But how do you
you
keep them accountable if they don't?
Right.
Like we're talking about all the successful them coming in under time. It's like, how do you can't always be everywhere. So
Right.
you have to keep guys accountable when they're on jobs representing you and the company.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're gonna miss some stuff, and then you have to say, guys, if we keep getting this wrong, we're gonna have some difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And ultimately, when you're the owner, right, that's where the leadership comes in, and you got to be not fearful to say, Bill, I asked you your opinion. We went back and forth. We kind of agreed, and but it was ultimately up to you to hit this mark. That's your job.
Yeah.
Now, let's adjust it for the next one. But if this continues, if I can't count on your knowledge or whatever, we're gonna have a difficult conversation, because this is your job. But
It's the conversation you're going to have with the client when you don't hit those times.
Right.
It's going to trickle down, and you have to prevent it from happening.
Right. And as an owner, I mean, as a human, we tend to be optimistic with our timeline. We talk about this all the time, is that, we want to have the right answer, not the correct, not the accurate answer, but what you want to hear, what the client wants to hear. And I try to instill in the guys, like, don't tell me what I want to hear. Tell me what this is going to take. If it's going to take a full month to fabricate this, I want to know that up front, because I'm going to look at it and the client's going to say, hey, can you build this in 3 weeks? And I'm going to want to say yes, and then
Yeah.
then I'll figure it out on the back end. But instead, if you tell me 4 weeks, all right, we're 5 weeks. Give myself some breathing room here. We're 5 weeks to fabricate. And I think as humans, we tend to lean on the optimistic side of scheduling, and that, in turn hurts us.
So I just read a book. I like to read a lot of books, and it describes exactly what you were talking about. That most people start, and I apply this to construction. It's behavioral psychology and behavioral economics, is that we take an inside view to the information that's very close to us. So how long is this staircase going to take? We think it's going to be X number of hours, as opposed to getting an outside view, meaning, all right, let's just back out of this. Let's approach it from an outside view. I know that each task should take this many hours, and we don't factor in all the things that go wrong, as opposed to an outside view, the last staircase that we did. Why don't we count up the treads and risers and come up with a unit price, apply that to this, and see where, like a very outside, high level view.
There's a formula.
Because what this book was talking about, what it does when we have an inside view and we make adjustments, they're very small adjustments away from our inside view. And so we don't get that many gains, or we don't get that much more accurate because we're still close to that original thought, as opposed to we can get an outside view. And it'll start bigger. The number will be bigger, for example, but we'll make bigger gains as we qualify things, and it actually becomes more accurate. So you got to be able to get an outside view. So it's pretty fascinating how that behavioral psychology applies to estimating. That's what, like, I was talking to one client. Say, what does it cost for 3 guys for a week to work at your company for a week, and how much materials will you burn through on your average job, right? There's a cost. You put your markup on it, and there's your price per week. How long is that project going to take? 10 weeks, and your cost is, $10,000. That's a $100,000 job. Just right there. We don't have to calculate anything. You know that it's going to be $10,000 just for the labor or whatever. Now run out the numbers and get more accurate with it, but like you'll start wanting to say like, we need to be at like 7 or 8, or we're very hopeful, right? Or 80,000 or whatever, when it's just like, just back out. How many weeks is it going to take for X?
But that's such a smart way of doing it, where if you need to see if the client's in the same ballpark as you, and then they turn to you and say, hey, it's 60 grand is in our budget. Boom.
Yeah.
Immediately you have a flag.
When I look, my jobs are usually smaller in scale. There's not so many things involved. So when I look at a job, it's like first I give them the budget based on time and just like throw numbers at materials. And then when I'm actually giving them more refined but still a napkin budget, I'll look at it 2 different ways. I'll throw unit costs on it, and then I'll actually go through and figure out like my time and make sure that I'm in the same page on both, and whichever one ends up being higher, I usually shoot towards that one to make sure that I'm covered and giving them a budget. But I'll look at it from 2 different views. I'm going to put like unit costs on it, or just like throw numbers at framing's going to be this much, and then like I'll actually break it down to how much time I think and how much material, and see where I am. Because like Shawn said, a lot of times you're only looking at it from one view, and the small manipulations you make to that number, you're still looking at it from that same point of view, and it doesn't really change that much, and it's not giving you another perspective.
I think the only way you can gain experience on that, so you can feel it out right away, is that if you're tracking it, meaning I have a spreadsheet that's 300 items long. That's my estimate that I come up with. That's what I'm working off of. Like if Ben has to do something, if I'm not there and he has to run the project and he has to do plumbing, electrical, HVAC, it can't be on me.
What I'm even referring to is prior to that. This is still trying to figure out, hey, I want to get you a rough cost for a
my
job.
Spreadsheet kicks out right away day one, where if I want to do square footage, I can dump it in square footage, then I'll do it all in my notebook on what I think on approximately.
Yeah.
But my point is that if you want to get into that later on, as you're getting in the project, you put in actual numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're buying it out so that way
later.
You always know that you're low. Like whenever you're doing that hand numbers, it's like framing, I'm always low on framing.
Yeah.
And then you know how accurate you can be.
I just like to be able to throw out, even as far as budget goes, like you have enough experience to walk into a place and be like, hey, this is my gut feeling on this. But then I want to go back and actually put some sort of legitimacy to that gut feeling and see where I am. And that's where I take like 2 different approaches to make sure I'm on the same page. I don't want to give somebody a number and go back and be like, hey, we should be actually this much higher. Like I'd rather work backwards.
But I'm saying, when you say you threw lump numbers at like framing, for guys that don't know how to do that, if you're tracking your project as you go, real time, it's not at the end and you're like just all these numbers are hitting you.
Yeah.
You're at framing and it's simple. Like framing labor, framing material, you're adding that in right away, seeing what your expenses are.
Yeah.
That way the next frame, I know it was $15,000 for framing. Like, it gives you the ability to learn that quicker, so that way you feel more comfortable and give you that baseline.
Yeah, anytime you can look back at something else and just compare it, it's like, all right, this house was 1,500 square feet, this one's 3,000. My rough number, that's, to your point, it's like getting that initial round of, hey, this is probably where we're going to be, and understanding whether that's a comfortable number for you to work.
And being somewhat accurate.
Right.
And then there's the confidence in developing, like what Tyler was saying with unit pricing or schedule pricing or whatever. Realize, like what you said, the 1,500 square foot house, 3,000 square foot house, the 1,500 one is just as expensive because it's smaller, or there's certain limitations.
Same number of fixtures.
Don't make sure that unit cost at a certain level, it costs you, like you said, baseline. You gotta know what your baseline is. Hey, it doesn't matter if it's 1,500 or 3,000. Like that's probably a bigger number overall for the 3,000 square foot remodel. but it's actually cheaper per square foot beyond 1,800 square feet because you're going to pay X amount of dollars anyway, and you got to know some of that because some guys they'll develop that unit price and then apply it to too small of a number and say, hey, it's like what your plumber would charge to come out and fix the water heater. $200 just to show up.
Right.
Like it's a minimum charge because below that we're not making any money.
Yeah, I think it can be more damaging when you're working backwards. Like, okay, my last one was 3,000 square feet. This is 1,500. It should be half as much.
Exactly.
Where like it's not half.
So
as
like
much.
I'm doing
80%
that right now.
maybe.
We build a 12,000 square foot house. We build 6,000, then a 3,500. And then my spreadsheet works for all that, but then you read through it and you're like, dude, there's no way. Like garage doors.
Exactly.
There's still 2 garage doors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's still cedar. So the $1,700 that the spreadsheet kicks out, it isn't that right.
No, it's
You
not.
know, there's a lot of things that really have to be adjusted, but you need to be able to know and look for it. That's why I'm a big fan of digging into all of them and just, like I guess with Benny all the time, we get a number in plaster. Before I even open the email, I'm like, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
Like I want to know that we're on
Yeah.
the same page. You know I do this.
Yeah,
and I'll be like,
he'll be in the podcast room and be like, yo, I just got landscape number. I'm not opening it. What do you think?
what do you think?
I'm
That's good. That's good.
What's the
That's-
scope?
cause-
He's like, just guess.
I shouldn't open that and think 10 grand and it's 30.
Yeah.
Something's either
That's
my
right.
expectations, everything's
That's
way
great
out
though.
of whack.
That is a good way to develop that outside view.
Yeah.
I don't
Make it
we
fun.
Yeah. Well, we all we know is what I haven't influenced that or numbers haven't started to influence us yet. That's
Yeah.
great. And you develop like, why do I keep thinking it's 10 when every time it's 30?
Yeah.
Is it the sub?
Yeah.
Is it the what am I missing?
Yep.
And I get a question a lot too from clients or from other people just reaching out asking for help saying, all right, well, the owner, they asked us for a square footage price. And just say, hey, listen, you might develop those prices internally, but don't feel like you have to share them. I like to tell owners like, oh, we don't price work that way, but let's do this. Let's just scope the job out,
Right.
come up with a price, and then you can divide it whatever square foot you want.
Yeah.
Because square footage of inside or, driveway. Do you want a deck? It's all square footage.
Exactly.
Which square footage?
Yeah. But like renovation to like new construction,
Right.
they're totally different.
Totally
Yeah.
different.
Totally different
Tot-
ballparks.
Totally different
And
pricing
you should
strategies.
and I'd like to actually hear your take on this, is that your overhead and profit, your margins should be different as well on those. There's a
Yeah.
lot more work to go into a renovation where if I'm doing 13% of new construction, that's pretty smooth. Like the renovation end of it, it's a whole different ballgame.
Right.
We talked about this quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have a different pricing strategy. Again, I say on remodels, right? You're putting in floor protection. People are still living there, dust barrier, all
Are
of
they
that.
moving out? Is it a house? Is it a condo?
And you just got to slow down.
Well,
I mean,
who,
you just
who
have.
said it that like you're building a new house with the house in the way?
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
great.
But that's the reality of it, and it's going to take longer, and the numbers aren't the same.
Even just dealing with homeowners who are on site on a daily basis, you got to walk in and like the questions start coming, and like there's just time that goes into that where it's completely different than having your subs show up to a site and not having to let them in, not having to make sure that the site's cleaned
Yeah.
up. It's like, turn the temp power off and scoot out when you're done.
Yeah,
It's
new
just
construction,
completely
you-
different dynamic.
You drop the tools and you go home. We
Yeah.
pick back up, but remodeling,
Different ballgame,
Yeah.
protection, all that stuff.
It's got to be priced differently.
I mean, that Boston Harbor job we did 700 square feet. Someone was like, "Hey, what was the square foot cost on that?"
You don't wanna know.
I'm like, "Yeah, it's 700 square feet, and we were there for 8 months. You don't want the square foot cost because that means nothing to your unit.
Yeah.
It's good. You're right. It's good to track it and to see that. So like you come across another project and they're like, "Hey, I have a 700 square foot condo. I want that exact look." And you can go back and you're like, "All right, your budget's going to be somewhere around here. This is what we spent on it."
I saw a builder do this at IBS 2 years ago, and he builds custom homes out in like Jackson Hole or whatever. And he uses square footage numbers, and he's got a spreadsheet, and he walks the client through and says, "What's the square footage do you want of this room and this room?" And he plugs the square footage number in, and it produces a low, medium, high price, and walks it. And they build the house on this spreadsheet. I thought it was a really great idea. And he gets down to the end of it and says, "This high price, this is just the initial. How will it affect your life when this project is 20% more of the high price?" And if they say won't be a problem, then they can move forward. If they say no, that's going to affect our life, that amount of money, go to the medium price, because they know what the selections that they've already made. This is like even pre-construction. This is sales process stuff. 20% more.
Feasibility study.
20% more of the medium price. How will that affect your life? That's okay. We can live with that. All right. This is where it's already been qualified, you know. And I thought that was a great way to do it. So you give them the comfort of, you know, kind of putting some square footage numbers together, but all of the things that developed the low, medium, and high, he factored in on the.
He brought contingency into the play.
Yeah, and you're also bracketing exactly like what Tyler said about when you're giving that budget range. You got to take the high number. It's called price anchoring, right? And set expectations, because now if we really dial in and figure out what the scope is, we might be able to be, because the high number is a high number because we need to cover ourselves. If we actually get them to hire us to do it, then we can walk through the process and price out the actual job. You want to make yourself look like a superhero, right? And say, I think it's 120. We move forward and it comes in at 117. It's great.
Or it gives them a couple extra bucks to buy some lighting.
Yeah, then you know they're going to spend 125.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter.
If somebody wants to work with you and you give them a price that's a little bit higher, like say you go with that high end and it's a higher end kitchen remodel and it's 130 versus 150, and you say 150 and they walk at 150, you weren't going to get that job at 130.
Either way.
Like, it doesn't really matter. At that point, if they don't want to spend 150, say, hey, listen, we really want to work with you, but how can we come down to this price? And that's more so getting the number out there, getting a reaction, and seeing where you are.
I'll tell them as a sales strategy with that, you know, when they say, well, 130 and they describe it and it is 150 and you got to walk, right? Because they're not going to change the scope. That's just what it is. I'll just tell them no one can do what you described for 130.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, they can't. Like, if someone says they can, I'm just letting you know it's not a good fit for us, but they're either incompetent or ignorant, and you may not want to participate in that kind of madness. We're gonna walk away because it's not a good fit for us. And when they go try to get that exact same project for 130, that information will be, that other guy told me that you're ignorant or incompetent. When you start asking, like,
What was his name?
Yeah, what was his name?
That's funny.
I think that it's crazy because there's so many different approaches to get to your end goal, and every company and every dynamic within a company is going to be different, and that's where it ends up taking systems and processes like Shawn has, and then you need to tailor them to however you're set up, because even if I had the same amount of guys as Nick, my approach to a job is going to be completely different, and the way that my company is built is going to be completely different. So it's never a standard across the board. So you have to take these things and then kind of tailor them and suit them to your own needs.
There's no silver bullet.
No.
Yeah, and there's no shortcut to job costing.
No.
That's what people like. How do you make it faster? But you don't. Like, you got to track your labor. You got to pull that info off the time. Now there's ways to streamline that, right? Automated stuff and software and apps and all that. But someone's got to break down. If you estimated 42 hours to install crown molding, you got to know, did it take us 42 hours to install it?
You can track it, but who's looking at it?
Yeah.
And then you got to take the time to dissect it, look at the job.
I can't tell you how many days and months, whatever, I used to walk through Home Depot and just update all my pricing.
Oh my God, yeah.
Dude, remember that? I mean, like, no, I'm still right on 450 a stud, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, just know it before I even committed to what I was putting out there. Just walk it, and I'd have like these lists of everything, and that's what I would do. And now it's the same thing. It's just at a huge level where it's like Riverhead gives me their quote, and it's like someone else gave me the quote. I'm going stud by stud. What's my biggest quantities that I have of like sheathing, and just making sure that like, I'm not getting gouged or I'm not overpaying for something, even at that level. And I talk to a lot of guys where they're like, you know, how do I make my margins work and stuff like that? I'm like, have you talked to your lumberyard about getting 6% off if you pay before the 10th of every month? I go, you could be opening up contingency in your budget by something very, very simple as that. Like, we do all ours that way. All our stuff from Riverhead we pay early. Well, before the 10th, but I try and pay it within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's it almost. And we do our structural stuff COD. It's not cash, but it's a check.
Yeah, but that's also, you got to know when the bills are due.
Yeah.
Or you're not going to get that. Yeah, you got to stay, right.
Well, it's the same as, like, I look at it like if a client was going away. Like, one of my clients just went, who's funding 2 of our projects, went away to Australia for 2 weeks. A lot can happen in 2 weeks. Window order's $200,000. Another window order comes in. As a PM, as an owner, you shouldn't be in today. You should be focusing on 2-3 weeks out, where if you're in today, there's already bigger fish to fry. And I get you can get behind on stuff, but you need to be ahead. Like if I just flew by the seat of my pants and then all that work was happening, I can't fund that project. I shouldn't be, but I physically can't.
Yeah.
My bank account isn't deep enough to do that.
Right.
So that's how you have to relate it every time. Don't use your bank as the company or the project's bank.
Right. I mean, one thing we try to not bill ahead, but we try to bill for when we're getting that check. So we're, our progress, we typically are doing progress payments, so everything's percentage. So if we're billing on a Thursday and that check's due on Friday or Monday, that, our percentages are going to be slightly skewed to make sure that we're covering up to Monday's labor or up to Tuesday's, or up to the next. If it's weekly, we go to the next week.
I feel like I've backed into it because I've had so many bank jobs that.
Yeah, banks are a little.
You had to base it on the bank inspector.
Right.
So I try and, instead of having multiple options, it's like that's my routine.
But
as if it.
You have to, but same thing is like if I schedule this now, when does the bank inspector come out? What percentage is he going to see?
Exactly
that's
right.
what I'm going to, and if it's a week, right, and that's where you call the bank inspector, hey, what's your process? And I used to do those bank inspections, and when contractors would call me up and say, it's going to take me, when you schedule this, it's going to take me about a week. Right, and if I know you're billing, if I come out on the job site right now today, when you schedule it, it's not going to be, but a week from now, that's the percentages that I'm looking at.
It's so key if you did it that way, and then you knew he was coming out every month, and you missed that, and you have windows that get delivered. I keep using windows because everyone can understand it, and that's $20,000 on a small job. Like if you missed it, you're covering that for a month.
Yeah.
Right, I think
no one would do that. You do it once.
Yeah, people need to realize that at that point you're physically financing the project for them.
Yeah. No, but now you're trying to peddle money from one way to another. Whether it's now you're worried about payroll, when that shouldn't. It's
like I got to pay.
It's
for
the heart of
windows.
your company.
Yeah, you always want to bill ahead as much as you can. So even with homeowners too, like we're going to get. Most guys aren't even getting enough to start the project, right? Because they're getting. So I'm like 30% up front to get on the schedule once we have an executed contract, 20% day one, so 50%.
I'm thinking it's a couple of jobs I have.
Yeah, it's a couple of your jobs. But for remodeling contracts, 50%.
I wouldn't want
up
that
front.
money in my account.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up because on a project, say it's $1 million house, are you taking $300,000 up front to get on a schedule?
Yes.
And you're taking another $200,000 when day one when you
hold on, but wait.
when a machine shows up.
No, so when you take that deposit, do you start? I'm not saying I'm disagreeing with it. You then take that, okay? The first round of invoicing. What happens with it? $300,000. Are you pulling from that money, or is that money tying to the end and then you're crediting it, like as if you're paying first month, last month rent?
I mean, depending on certain requirements. I mean, you could the way that you should account for it in the book. You haven't done the work yet, right? But I'm going to start project management. I'm going to start ordering
saying,
materials.
Like right now, we're taking smaller deposits, and then that just gets credited at the last invoice. So meaning my first invoice that rolls around, I'm then billing all that stuff, and I'm not crediting the $30,000, $40,000.
And I'm doing it the other way, where if I take 30%, I have 15 line items on the job. It goes 33% across all line items. I don't know if that's right or wrong, and yours is the total opposite.
Yeah,
where it's money that doesn't
discussion.
exist until the very end, and then you're billing. It's like, but you already paid the $300,000. Your final bill is $5,000. I mean,
yeah, it depends on also, do you bill work in progress, or are you there's a bunch of different accounting things that you want to make sure that you.
For the record, anyone's listening, don't do milestones.
No.
Just for the record.
Because you miss a handle on a kitchen, the kitchen's not done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I've been there.
It's
percentage complete.
That's
I'll be
right,
99.8% complete, and I'll save the $2 until that handle comes in.
Window is broken, couldn't finish the siding.
Yeah.
That's a whole
Siding's not done.
bundle.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I define substantial completion, and you say we're at substantial completion.
Yeah.
Everything else is punch list stuff.
Right.
Well, then the best part is how do you, we talk about this, identifying punch list, and then preventing that punch list turning into a warranty and wish list.
Right, and that's something that when I worked on my contract, it was final. So once, I'm trying to think of how we worded it, but basically
Brand new.
Yeah, brand new.
Just wrote
Just
it.
in place.
It's in my head.
No, but we would create a punch list with the client. We'd walk the job. We'd create a punch list. We'd leave that list with them overnight.
Are they creating a holdback with that list?
A holdback?
Are you putting a value on that, or is it?
It's for the final payment.
Okay.
So your final payment's not due until the punch list is complete. So we walk the job together, and at the end of the job, then they have a day to kind of review the list, add anything else, and then we schedule a week to get everything done. At that point, final payment's due. Everything after that, we don't touch.
Anything beyond that list.
It's warranty.
Correct.
But warranty doesn't kick in until the final payment is received.
So what happens if that list is only 5 items long, and they're holding off 5,000? I've done it with another company where you have your final payment.
Yeah.
You then make that list. You put a value to that list. You still get paid the remainder of that, and then that list has a value to it of like $2,000 or whatever it is, and that's it.
Isn't that making it more complicated?
Seems
I don't.
like
I,
it.
yeah,
It
I don't.
depends
I,
on how much it.
I don't put I wouldn't put a value to the punch list. It'll just vary because I just want to put my payment in my
If there's $20,000 left over and you have a punch list of 6 things,
But why can't you just get the 6 things done?
no, but you're holding off $20,000 that you're already done with that point. You're
But
at substantial completion.
if that's a $2 million project, it's 1%. I mean, it's pretty. That seems applicable.
I know the company I was with, they wanted to have it as minimum as possible, meaning it's not your final payment. This is punch list.
Right.
They broke them up.
I wouldn't get into putting a value to the punch list because that's just more arguing of like, But it just depends on especially if it's a cost plus job and they see a lot more numbers, then that might make sense. But in general, it's just here's the payment schedule. We're going to tell you when we're at substantial completion. We're going to schedule the punch list, and this is what I see a lot of contractors making the mistake. You make the punch list first and start doing it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right? And then you schedule it and you show the client what was on the punch list because you are in control of the punch list.
You're being proactive.
You're the professional. You make your punch list with your guys, with your subs. You show them the progress that the punch list started a week ago. Now, here's what we have remaining. We'll walk through the house. Let's put the blue tape on the walls and do all that stuff. You have 24 hours to add to this list after the walkthrough. And that's not a surprise to you because that's exactly what it says in the contract. When we complete the punch list walkthrough, maybe that signals a payment. I'm going to give you an invoice for the remainder, last 5%, last 20,000, whatever it is. And I'm going to go ahead and give that to you now, and when we're done, we'll let you know. So I'm not going to wait till we get it done and then send you that invoice, right? Again, being proactive. Let's go ahead and just deal with this. Don't pay it until we're done, but if we get done in 2 days, let's be ready. And because what people will do when you walk them through that process and they get that final bill and it's sitting in front of them, you say, don't worry until, don't need to pay it till they're done. What are they going to do? Oh, I don't want to deal with it next week. Here, can I just get you a check now?
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
Sure, if you want to do that. It's all cash flow, baby.
Yeah, because I think if you do the punch list and then you're sending the invoice, then they're like, all right, I got to make sure the punch list is actually done.
Yeah.
Then it's a conversation in that manner. I think,
I mean, you're right. Clients, they'll get on board with that process. I said last week on stories, the issues that you have at the middle to the end of the project are probably because you skipped something in the sales process or the contract.
You're out of the honeymoon stage.
Yeah. We should have explained to you how we wind up a project before we started.
I don't know. The beginning of the project, there's a lot going on. You're defining scope, you're defining details, you're defining contract, you're talking about numbers. There's a lot of buzzwords that go around during that phase that I don't think a lot of people. I know a lot of clients. I'm going to assume that they weren't paying 100% attention. I can't go and say, hey, 7 months from now, remember that paragraph 7 of the contract? That's not the atmosphere I'm going to have with my clients.
No, but you got to be like, hey, remember paragraph 7. You probably don't, but that's why we write it down. Let's just go over it.
That's why it's easy to have a standard in place too, because like if every contract is like you're going to tailor it some, but then not having a standard, you have so much stuff going on. I can't keep straight what's in there. So if you have a standard process and procedure that you're following, and it's like, yeah, this is just what we always do, and then maybe you're tweaking some things, but if not, it's like, oh yeah, I did actually put in to do for that, or like, there's no way of tracking that with everything that's going on a daily basis.
Yeah, standardizing and tracking system. I mean, all of those make everything so much easier. The conversations with the client, selling a job for the right amount, making sure that your guys know the schedule and what the expectations are.
I mean, that's it. Setting expectations, not just for your employees, for yourself, for your customers, for everyone.
Right.
Yeah, and when you know how it is that you do things, you can kind of go on muscle memory. Oh, no, we don't do it like this is what we do. Like, this is what our contract says, and this is, you don't have to think about it. It's
like breathing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And then you get to make a choice when you're going to change the policy.
But it also,
and if you do, and it's painful, you're like, oh, dang it, why do we do that?
But you also know you get uncomfortable because it's out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And then you know where that, I shouldn't have done that. Like, go home that night and you're like, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
This isn't what I do. Stay in my lane.
Yeah.
And the more you can standardize, then you're not putting yourself in the uncomfortable position all the time of trying to explain your process. Or like, this is how we do it, or this is how we bill. It's like, it's all right there. It's all, we already just went through it.
And then you can delegate it to someone else.
Yep.
Eventually, this
Love
is
that.
how we do it. You got to delegate.
How many times I say, what happens if you get sick tomorrow? Does anyone know how to do
Right.
your job?
I got ran over by that bus last night.
Dude, I almost get 3 times. So,
NS Builders, Vintage Builders, dead. JLC 2018.
I don't think we'd make a headline.
No, I mean, ideally that would
someone
be,
would, maybe.
That would
No?
be what you'd want, is that if you did disappear, you could prolong everything that you're doing. But I mean, it just ends up being on a smaller or a larger scale if you don't have all that in place. Like, if something happened to me, obviously nobody's doing the work. But if something happened to you, like, nobody's running the work. So it's just on 2 different scales.
But if your bookkeeper gets sick, has to go to a funeral, like, I've had companies where people don't know how to log into QuickBooks because
Yeah.
they totally had all the faith in that one person. And no company should ever run on the faith of one person.
No.
The fate.
Yeah, and for guys, like Tyler that was saying, like if he's hit by a bus or whatever, but someone needs to know where the file is.
Yeah.
Here's the information. If I don't show up or whatever, go here.
Nick's wife can go on there and run payroll.
Yeah. Go here and
You
it'll
have that system in place?
My guys. Megan.
What, Nick?
Shawn, this was awesome.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. Really excited to.
We'll have to
be able
do it. We'll have to make it a
this.
series
We are at
because no one loves talking about this stuff.
No, they don't. I do.
He does.
Yeah, no, I know.
This is my jam. This is my craft now.
That's what it is.
So we're at Tapco and Boral's booth, 202 JLC 2018, podcasting live, The Modern Craftsman with Shawn Van Dyke of ShawnVanDyke.com.
That's right. It's great. Keep it simple. Guys, thanks for having me on. This was awesome.
Well, it's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
You can find us.
Is it my turn this time?
Yeah.
Tyler, how about you do it? Where can
No,
you
I
find
just-
us?
Where can we find us? iTunes is a big
No,
one.
we're starting with the
Oh,
website.
all right.
Website.
Oh,
Website.
the website, themoderncraftsman.org.
I'm like
email us.
trying to get it to you through my head.
They're just mouthing the words to it. Make
Just
sure you get
feed
it right.
to me. This is like
great.
right where I start falling asleep.
Yeah, you can email us info@themoderncraftsman.org. You can find us on Instagram at
Modern Craftsman. DM us. Hit us up with new guests, new content, new questions.
we are on all podcast platforms, including Amazon,
iTunes, Stitcher, Alexa,
Spotify,
Spotify.
I like Spotify,
Google Play.
Google Play, basically anywhere that you could
Everything.
listen to a
Yeah,
podcast.
pretty
No
much
excuses.
everywhere.
And if we're not on one, get a hold of us.
Hit us
Benny?
up on iTunes. Benny's going to get us an app.
Thanks. We don't say thanks to Benny enough.
We-
Thank you,
Thanks,
thank you,
Benny.
Benny,
We always go,
for,
sorry,
for
Benny.
producing. He's telling us to wrap
Wrap it up.
Let's go.
Yeah. Leave a review, guys. It's as easy as hitting 5 stars or 4.
Later.
Thanks.